Shut up and sit down.
Geraldton is a coastal city with a large iron ore port and is surrounded by huge wheat and canola farms. Walking around Western Australia's third largest city, I found that the locals are very proud of their many connections to the past. There are memorials to the sunken HMAS Sydney, a replica of the longboat from the sunken Dutch tall ship Batavia, a restored library used for supporting local music, and a not in any real use lighthouse. So far on my trip down the west coast, it seems to be becoming my biggest gripe of the state is that the only volunteer community groups all seem to be based around historical museums, manned by old people and preserving every relic and sandstone structure. I mean, it's only now in Geraldton that there are some public football fields supporting local sporting clubs, and Black Beach hosts the first life-saving club I've seen since Broome. This town really does remind me of Wollongong, where there is a long thin suburbia stretched on a coastal strip, and everybody seems to have a water view. Both cities have large industrial ports that spoil the view and the cargo ships lining up on the horizon. However, in Wollongong they have numerous spectacular beaches with protected headlands. In Geraldton, the exposed sandblasted beaches that covered with rotten seaweed that emanated a sewer smell. The high tide swallows up the entire beach up to the steep sand dunes, and if the tides were out enough to expose the beach, then the waves can't get over the rocky reef just offshore. There is only a small section on St George's Beach that I felt remotely comfortable, although totally lacking any waves and only suitable for a paddle. Further north of Geraldton is the holiday town of Calbury, which is surrounded by the Calbury National Park. The town itself is like most other holiday coastal locations, with a number of resorts, retreats and caravan parks. There is one main very rocky beach that lacks the protection of any coastal headlands. The surrounding national park is very large and has two major features: the coastal cliffs that has the Burunda Trail walks that stretches 8 kilometres from the natural bridge to the Eagle Gorge, and secondly is the several trails that are in and around the Murchison River Gorge. While looking at the native vegetation, I couldn't help draw parallels between the coastal walk at the Burunda National Park on the central coast of New South Wales. Both have very sandy soils and only short grubs grow in the windy and dry landscape. On my way to Calbury, I passed two other interesting scenic locations. The first was Hut Lagoon Pink Lake, and the second was the Leighton Convict Depot. The Pink Lake is unique but difficult to get excited about. The reddish algae settlement floats on the bottom of the lake, giving it a pinkish colour. Some pictures of the lake show a far greater pinky colour than I was able to see or capture with my camera from the foreshore. Also, because of the fragile ecology of the lake, there is an interesting sign that I'm sure has been the basis of many racial jokes that I'm too afraid to say. The convict depot is also interesting, but for me the highlight was reading the graffiti on the walls. I was hopeful of reading something from the original prisoners in the cells, but it was mostly people scribing that they were here, although dating back over 100 years. Leaving before sunrise, I was always expecting the hop to Geraldton to be a long day. One of the side goals of this journey was to visit all 4 extreme cardinal points of the Australian mainland. After looking on Google Maps, the westernmost point is on the far side of an isolated national park. I was not 100% confident of the condition on the roads getting me there, as most of the roads branching off the main highway in WA have all been dirt. Checking Google Maps satellite view, it showed some bitumen along the road, but not all. Heading out of Carnarvon, I had a plan for success and I was hopeful that it would all work out. I got to the Overland Roadhouse at the Shark Bay turnoff before 9 AM. I filled both my tank and the fuel bladder to the brim. This was the first time that I had used a fuel bag, as Step Point was about a 400-kilometre return trip, and there was no other petrol stations in between. The bike's highway range is about 320, leaving me about 50 kilometres short. At this point, the plan was all moving nominally, so off down useless loop road I went, and to my surprise, finding the first 60-odd kilometres sealed road, my hopes were high. Hitting the dirt about 120 kilometres short of the point did make me think twice, but once having a look at the quality of the road, I was still confident that I could make it all the way there, although my average speed was about to drop to 50 kilometres an hour. I wasn't going to turn back at the second sign of difficulty, so I decided to see how far I could get, as the salt mine just before the Idle National Park was obviously being maintaining the roads and they were in good condition. I was just about to enter the national park when I ran into one of my fellow motorcyclists on a KPM. It was much better suited for the environment. He told me to let my tyres down, but I told him that having hard tyres, hard suspension, low clearance and too much weight on the bike meant I could only go slow. So I just pressed on, and a few minutes later I made the national park entrance. About 5 kilometres into the park, and there was a fork in the road between Step Point and the false entrance, and my plan for success was all still going well. However, about a kilometre after that, I ran into some very loose sand that was over a foot deep. And if you've ever walked over Bondi Beach, then you know how just soft this sand was. I hopped off the bike and went for a walk up the road, and there was no end to the sand in sight. I was able to push through several hundred metres of this stuff, but not the tens of kilometres it looked to be. Also being about 42 kilometres short of the point, the idea of hiking the rest of the way was not feasible, as it would have taken me at least 2 full days to get there and back. So here's me admitting defeat before failure was thrusted upon me. I'm sure some of you watching would say that I should have battled on until I succeeded, but like the trip to Cape York, the main goal was getting around Australia and not injuring myself or breaking the bike on the way, and that would sacrifice the entire trip. I am somewhat dejected that I didn't get to see the cliff faces at Step Point, but I did get to see some of the park, and it has taken the pressure off me getting back up Cape York. And in hindsight, the goal of visiting Step Point spoilt the opportunity of exploring Dedham. I could have had an enjoyable day rather than a day where I was thankful that nothing bad happened to me or the bike. All in all, the goal of visiting all cardinal points would have been far easier by the sea, and to achieve that goal I should have just bought myself a sailing boat. The fuel bag was expanding with the heat and becoming awkward to carry. I spilt a small amount of it while pouring the extra fuel into the tank to get rid of it. Getting back to the roadhouse about 4, it left me with a near 3-hour trip to Geraldton. The long straights over the top end had not yet finished, but once I had made it past Kirrilby National Park, the road at least started to roll up and down. It was about then I ran out of daylight and had to pull over to put on my wind cheater and take some photos of the setting sun. I had been riding from dawn to dusk and still over an hour away from making my next stop. All in all, 13 hours in the saddle with only a few short breaks. Every hop down the west coast has resulted in a very noticeable drop in temperature. I managed to book myself a very comfortable single bedroom apartment, and having reverse cycle air conditioning, I can't feel the cold at the moment. There's some strange things in WA, as there's a latana bush right outside, but it doesn't have the odour that I've come to recognise the plant with. The bike is doing well, even after 300 kilometres of dirt trying to get up to Step Point. While in Perth I shall be able to replace both my tyres, and after that saying goodbye to the very hard Michelin rear. It should return my maximum ZR speed rating of 300 km an hour, even though I'm not likely to hit 200 km an hour again. Most of the road trains I'm likely to encounter in the northwest of WA, as everywhere else in the country has good access to rail. The only noticeable comment I can make right now is that with all the wheat and canola farms around here, me and the bike are getting covered in bugs. After nearly 10,000 kilometre journey lugging the stylish satellite all over the tropical top end, the dish is still working fine. The last time I was able to check that it was all still okay was when I was in Noosa Heads. Starlink is providing services all the way up the east coast to Townsville and including Hewarton. If only I had started this journey 6 months earlier and went around the country clockwise, then lugging this dish with me would have been a little bit more useful. That's 2020 hindsight. Otherwise, NBN and Vodafone are all working perfectly here. Geraldton is the first real town that I've run into on the west coast. Up till now, many of the towns have been holiday towns, but the only source of income in the upper parts of WA is either rural, mining or tourism. This place is very sandy and reminiscent of the eastern suburbs. It also is very flat and the trees struggle to grow. Local public spaces beyond child playgrounds are rare, and the only community events are restoring historical relics. I'm thankful that since leaving Queensland, I'm only now seeing the police when they're out breathalyzing motorists. And some of the other noticeable changes are that the fences are lower and the shops have stopped barricading themselves behind bars, and I no longer need to register before buying alcohol. Next stop is Perth, where I expect to take a break from travelling for about 4 weeks and catch up on my taxes. I also have some other work that needs to be done while I wait for the weather to warm up and start making my way back to the east coast. I'm not 100% sure what I'll do with the channel in the interim. Maybe I'll do a review on the entire time I was in Queensland. If you have any suggestions, then please feel free to comment below. So thanks for following my adventures around Australia. Remember to go out there and do something to enjoy your day.